destroyed it for you this time.
Yeah, instead of being me. Okay, so I'm going to start reading it
Alright,
now.
I'm hitting play.
Is everyone ready? All right. It was a frigid, windless night. Icy moonlight cut through the air like a knife, coating rows of corn in cold silver. Great dead trees stood high and far above all else, while crows stood solemnly upon wooden walls and barbed wire fences. The silence was undisturbed until the tall grass began to rustle as though it were whispering, while a lone figure carefully traversed and parted the bunches. The person, a man, was unmistakably a survivor, one of the entity's many playthings. His name, Dwight Fairfield, was known by others as the good leader and simultaneously the one who was a bit cowardly and strange to talk to. Stubborn and wimpish, was not well liked, but not hated either, as he seemed to others like a bit of a pushover, whose loneliness made him far too desperate to compromise. A temperament like his was clear in his mannerisms, especially in such a hostile environment. Within a hellish purgatory filled with monsters, not only did his strong leadership qualities emerge, but the nail biting, scaredy cat in Dwight also truly came out, and now was no exception. With empty hands clutching each other in a tight, whirling motion, he crept slowly and low to the ground, with nervous eyes darting along the path ahead behind large, square framed glasses. He had certainly found himself in an unideal situation. A terribly bad feeling sat at the bottom of his gut like a stone, as, somehow, he had been separated from the others and was left alone in the wide open farm field, nothing to hide his presence but the rows of corn and bunches of dead grass.
Yo, he on
As he,
cold wind.
as he moved along slowly so as not to disturb the grasses too much to draw unwanted
I,
attention, he
I'm
bit his
sorry, I have
tongue
to
to keep
interrupt.
himself from cursing while he fretted over it. What?
Pause! Caleb's fucking interrupting!
In the distance, a wolf howled.
Shut the fuck up! Shut the
In
actual
the
fuck up!
distance, a wolf howled. Ow! Uh,
What the dog
uh,
doing?
Thank you, Willie! Okay, I'm sorry. You may proceed.
David stepped on it. Just steps on it. All right. Where was I? The others thrived on his firm directions, or so he thought. How could they leave him in such a high stakes trial, no less? Fuck, he thought bitterly. Fuck. I'm a sitting duck out here. The man was trembling, freezing in place every time he heard the tiniest of sounds, while adrenaline coursed through his blood and he racked his brain for some solution. I gotta find somewhere to hide. It was the best idea he could come up with. Very in character, too. Daring to rise from his crouched position, Dwight slowly stood above the rows of corn and took a quick look around. In the distance, he spotted the enormous, out of commission tractor, as well as the many scattered floodlight posts standing above the generators, all of which were dark. A bad sign. However, Dwight did spot a single structure standing beside one edge of the brick barrier. Two wooden walls, one with a window, built into one another in the shape of an L. It was quite a few paces away, and likely had a hook nearby, which wasn't ideal. But unfortunately, White didn't get much more time to look for something closer or safer before a shrill scream from the other side of the field startled Dwight and made him squat behind another under the cover of the corn so quickly that he lost his balance and fell forward onto his hands. Shit! Dwight hissed aloud to himself through his gritted teeth, quickly sitting back onto his hunches to brush the pebbles off his palms, which had left small indents in the skin. The man's heartbeat was loud in his ears, while his breath trembled out of his lips and his body dampened in sweat. Sinking slowly to his knees, Dwight bowed his head and tried to take deep breaths as a fruitless attempt to ease some anxiety. He took about 30 seconds just to let his heart rate go down, recognizing that crouching in one spot for too long is quite possibly one of the worst ideas. before rising to take another look. Slowly, his eyes raised, this time just barely enough to see above the corn, looking in the direction of the scream, where there was nothing to see. Dwight bit his lip. For a moment, he at least knew the direction to stay away from, assuming that the scream he heard was something being put on a hook. The killer could be anywhere now. Exhaling a small, shaky swear, Dwight mentally kicked himself for hesitating. Now there was no time at all, but he knew he needed to get moving. Sucking a breath in through his teeth to steel himself, the man began to move again, corn parting as he went along. His breath shook with every exhale through his fingers, where his hand was clasped tightly over his mouth to prevent being heard, although it was probably in vain. The journey wasn't as long as he thought it would be. Soon he came to the edge of the corn, where the structure stood just a short pace away. The only problem was, between Dwight and his destination was emptiness, nothing but short, dead grass and dirt. He would be out in the open there. Fuck, Dwight muttered against his palms, still held tightly against his mouth. It's so close. I could make it. I just need to be quick. It was not an easy thing to do. And a scrambling, frantic, and certainly inelegant series of movements, accompanied by tiny, frightened whimpering, Dwight managed to cross the frontier between the corn and sweet, sweet shelter which he crouched against, shaking and panting. Desperate, despite the rising nausea in his stomach, immense relief washed through Dwight as a brusque, thank fucking God, followed the end of a deep breath out. Taking a moment to enjoy the sensation of splintery wood against his skin and the overall feeling of safety, Dwight took breath after deep breath, which gradually slowed as his heart rate calmed. It was an amazing feeling, that which came after a bout of bravery that did not end in death or maiming, especially for Dwight, who wore a small, relieved smile. However, the period of repose didn't last long, for after a few minutes of resting and being proud of himself, Dwight got himself up and crept around the structure, hoping to hide in the corner, and froze when he saw what was there instead. Tucked in the corner where two walls met, standing strong and tall, was a locker. Dwight's breath immediately caught in his throat, and his legs nearly gave out underneath him. He could not believe what he was seeing, and for a moment he debated taking off his glasses to clean them. With red paint cracked and peeling off the slightly rotted wood and metal handles frosted with rust, it was one of the most beautiful things Dwight had ever seen. He almost didn't want to get any closer. Slight sway, Dwight lurched a few steps forward, wide-eyed and reaching a hand out. Slowly, carefully for fingers to brushing flaking paint. Immediately, there was an unfamiliar spark somewhere in Dwight, as he almost gasped. Wow, he whispered, pressing his palm flat against the locker's surface, doing so carefully as though he were afraid the vivacity of the locker would not allow it. For a moment, Dwight could only see that locker. He forgot about the entity, the killer, even his fellow survivors. It was as if another entity had whisked him away to his greatest fantasy. There he stood, as if he were frozen in time, unsure what to say or how to behave. All he could hear was his heartbeat pounding in his ears. I can't believe this is real, Dwight thought, swallowing hard, and stepped closer so that his body could press itself against the locker, and there was but a mere inch between it and the tip of his nose. He paused a moment, taking in the scent of rotted wood and dust, before his hands slid down to take hold of the handles. With an incredibly gentle tug, he pulled the doors towards himself until there was a crack between them big enough for him to fit through. Hesitating, Dwight peeked in, his nose briefly overpowered by the musty smell of dry rot billowing past him from inside, and gapped at the hatchets hung on the back wall. Jeez. He would have He would have been intimidated or unnerved by them if not for the incredibly enticing aroma of the locker itself inviting him in. As Dwight slipped inside, the doors silently shuttering behind him, he was overcome by a force that almost made his legs give out from under him. It was an impressive, powerful pressure. The feeling of being somewhere you knew you weren't meant to be, at a time where you were supposed to be doing something else, but knowing that you were completely safe and hidden from danger. It shook Dwight from his very core. His jaw fell open. He quickly clapped a hand over his mouth, only barely able to contain the shocked noise that most definitely would have given him away. Letting out a slow, shaky breath and leaning back, Dwight let his shoulders meet flaky wood, head tilting back as something rousing and intoxicating washed over him. He may as well have been picked up and put on cloud 9. As his mind went blank, he began feeling hands around himself, his chest and diaphragm, and breathed out vibrato hum. Temperature inside the compartment was rising slowly, degree by degree, with his every sigh as a faint blush crept onto his cheeks. There was no thought in his mind, none at all, as he moved himself rhythmically and in slow motion, his glasses vaguely fogging and tiny beads of sweat appearing to cling to his forehead. Nothing about this was orthodox. Typically, Dwight was a very shy, straight-laced man who was an obvious virgin. Everyone teased him about it, and a coward. So this kind of off-color behavior was incredibly uncharacteristic. Yet, the locker alone had brought it out of him. Now, he was certainly a sight. Imagine what the survivors would say about this. Although nothing was really happening but a man short of squirming in a locker, feeling himself up, it was apparently enjoyable and distracting. In all the excitement, Dwight did not hear the terror radius as it approached. Scampering through the corn and dead grass, Anna, the huntress, had spotted the locker from a distance and rushed right for it with purpose, for she had run out of hatchets. Despite Dwight's heartbeat getting louder and louder, pounding in his ears like a drum, it went completely ignored, erroneously assumed to be a sound aroused in him by the energy of the locker and nothing else. Though when the locker doors were wrenched open and he came to be bathed in a red light, he realized his mistake as every sound at once fell away, his heart nearly stopping. The huntress, her hand on the handle, froze. A survivor was not what she expected to find, especially not one that was doing that. Entirely floored by the sight of a man inside, gaping at her like a deer caught in headlights, face flushed and shirt askew, she didn't move, not even to raise her axe. Dwight choked out after a moment, uncomfortable with the awkward silence hanging between them, while the huntress kept him pinned under an invisible gaze, trying to decide whether she was offended or not. Sorry? He wasn't sure exactly what he was apologizing to the killer. His brain was currently racked by incredible embarrassment, his face hot with discomfort. He was expecting her at any moment to grab him by his tie, yank him out of the locker, and cleave him in half. But no such thing happened. For the huntress, this was rather upsetting discovery. Silently going through multiple stages of mortification and confusion behind her mask, she considered Dwight a few moments longer before stepping back and brusquely shutting the locker doors. Dwight could have sworn he heard her mutter something sharply in Russian just before she hurriedly stalked away, terror radius that accompanied her presence fading into nothingness. Dwight, stiff as a board, let out the breath he'd been holding and combed a shaking hand through his sweaty black hair. That was close. Too close. I better avoid lockers from now on.